Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Thor Conklin joining us. Thor, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Thor, for those who aren't familiar with your work, I know you run a well-known podcast, but you do a lot more than that. So just take a moment and share a little bit of what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's funny, as people ask all the time, they're like, do you do a podcast full time? Is that like your job? I'm like, no, that's not my job. That's my side gig. We own a profitability consulting firm and an executive coaching.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's explore that together. I mean, you've also bought and sold multi-million-dollar businesses and run a global risk management consulting firm. But before we get to that, let's go back to the early days. I believe you were 18 years old and you were selling life insurance door to door. Is that correct?
Attempting to sell life insurance.
Well,
that's correct.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that for a moment. Like, to some, that just sounds like torture. So why did you do it?
Yeah, it really was torture. I graduated high school. Apparently, you were supposed to get great grades in high school in order to get into a great college. I missed that chapter somewhere along in my youth. And I was working
too.
Yeah. So I was working with someone and this opportunity came up to sell life insurance. I didn't realize it was going to be door to door, but I was selling life insurance. And I always believe that whatever I put my mind to, I can accomplish. And I always had an entrepreneurial spirit growing up. I was always around businesses and I thought, what a great opportunity. I get into business, I can make a mark and let's do it. Didn't realize how difficult it was going to be, but I had the business cards, I had my briefcase, I had my three-piece suit. And off I went. Not very successfully, but I tell you, if there's one thing that has probably shaped me, I wouldn't say more than anything, but it certainly had a very, very big impact. And that is sales like that, whether it's door-to-door insurance sales or knife sales or newspaper sales or whatever it is. You gain such an ability to work with people. And you know what it means to have no thrown in your face every moment. And you just bounce back up and you just keep going.
How did you do that? Because that just freaks a lot of people out. I mean, the idea of rejection. I was speaking with a client the other day who is just really fearful of rejection, of hearing no. How did you learn to overcome that? What was the transition, or when did the light bulb go off for you that, hey, this is all part of the process?
Yeah, you just got to keep doing it. The first time it hurts, the second time it hurts a little less, and so on. I have a technique that I use, which is 3, 2, 1, go. I use it to today. Matter of fact, it's in my calendar every single day about 4 a.m. just to remind me when I'm getting ready to jump in the pool at 5 a.m. to do swimming lap. It's cold. I don't really want to get in, and I just start the countdown. 3, 2, 1, and it doesn't matter. I just go. And the same thing with being rejected. All you got to do is just get back up. There's a saying, SW, 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 SW. Some will, some won't, so what? Someone's waiting. I've modified that a little bit. And what I like to say is some will, some won't. So why? Instead of just constantly just moving on to the next one, try to analyze a little bit. Why aren't they saying yes? And learn from that. And every no gets you that much closer to a yes. You can learn from it.
I think that's a really great point. I was thinking as you were talking here about my own background, and not too dissimilar from what you were sharing. I mean, I sold Cutco knives at one point.
Yeah.
I was at a stage where I wanted to make some extra money during the summer so that I could go overseas. And I did a whole bunch of jobs. I lay sod. So for those who don't know what that is, that's big rolls of heavy grass and soil. I worked in a warehouse, electronics warehouse, where I was moving boxes filled with dust, and I was allergic to dust mites. So that wasn't fun. And I sold Cutco knives, and I was really good at that, actually. But one thing that just kind of, when you were saying about the why, one thing that I've always thought about, or I guess I've realized maybe more recently, is that the reason why I was able to do all the things that I've done is because I always had a purpose. I always had something, that a reason for why I was doing it. And if I go back even further, for me, the early years, from probably age like 6.5 or 7 until probably 17, sports was my life. That's all I was doing. I was very competitive and I was quite good at it, but I was doing it because I wanted to win. And when I think about in school, when I wanted to accomplish something, not in terms of my grades, because I wasn't very good at that, but if I wanted to change a program or get access to something that I wasn't supposed to. It was always because I wanted something. Like, there was a reason. And I think that's kind of like what you're getting to in terms of the why, right?
Absolutely. You need I call it a vision of where you're trying to go. You got to be really, really clear on why you're doing it and where you're going.
So what do you say then to people who understand that? They've heard the Simon Sinek book and the YouTube TED Talk of start with why and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of people who in a sales situation or in a business development situation still struggle because they have that fear of quote unquote failure. So maybe would you say that they're lacking purpose or lacking drive? I mean, what would you call upon or how might you counsel them to overcome that fear and ultimately take the action that can really get them to a place where they'll start to see more momentum and progress?
Yeah, and look, fear is a natural occurring thing within us as humans, and it serves a very good purpose. We're afraid to cross the road during a green light with traffic screaming by at 60 miles an hour. That's probably a good thing to have. A mechanism that says this is not very safe. Beware. Danger and fear is not something that we need to repress. It's not something we need to get over. It's something that we need to learn how to dance with. We need to move with it. If we were sitting in the same room, and if I put my hand up and if I pushed it towards you, we were kind of hand to hand, I pushed it towards you, the natural thing for you to be is to push back. And that's what happened. Energy moves forward, but resistance is going to be on the other side. And that's what happens very often with fear is we try to wrestle it, we try to beat it, we try to conquer it. Don't do that. Just dance with it, move with it, understand, acknowledge it, and then make intelligent decisions. Put yourself on a timer. 3, 2, 1, go. Move forward despite that you're fearful, move in spite of it. Just keep moving.
I think that's great advice. A real point of distinction between those who struggle and those who are successful. Understand that dealing with a challenge or rejection or anything that comes their way and fear, right, is all part of it. And they just get up faster. They don't let that fear or whatever it is really hold them back. Sure, it might knock them down, but they're going to get up. They're going to keep moving. And because of that, they're taking more action in total than someone who really is being paralyzed or significantly held back by that. Let's fast forward a little bit. I mean, in 2000, you got into risk management consulting. Talk to us a little bit how you went from doing life insurance sales door to door to starting a global risk management consulting firm.
The funny thing is, it's all connected. I was selling life insurance or trying to sell life insurance is probably a more accurate term. And I realized that there was an industry here, but most people had no idea what they were doing. They were just winging it. And I started to research the industry and found out there was actually a couple of colleges in the United States that actually had degrees in insurance and risk management. I contacted one in New York, didn't initially get accepted. I had to do a couple courses on the side in order to get in. That's a whole different story of actually how I got in because I was originally rejected due to my grades. Mm-hmm. But got in, went into the insurance business, spent 15 years working with private equity firms, helping them buy and sell companies, helping them with the due diligence on the insurance and risk management side. And then in 2000, I was actually down here in Atlanta, and I was going to take another regional position with a competitor of ours. And one of the private equity firms I was working with called me into New York and said, would you consider coming on our team and being one of our members of our staff, or would you consider setting up your own company, taking care of our portfolio companies worldwide? At that point, they had 10 companies with combined total revenue of $12.7 billion. This is a billion when it was actually meant something back in 99, 2000. And that's what I did. I had 20 minutes to form my first company. I came out of the conference room. I had the name, had the cost structure, and my first company was formed in an unusual manner where 100% of my time was immediately purchased and off to the races.
So when you found yourself in that position, you mentioned you were at 100% capacity from day one, which is something that very, very few people find themselves in unless they are considering themselves to be consultants, but really they're more like a contractor working for one main client. And maybe that's the position that you were in, or did you feel like you were running a business that had to also be thinking about business development and marketing? Or was it really that you had a consulting business, but all your time was just focused on serving the clients that came with the business as you started it?
That's a great question. The way I structured it is that they had 90% of my time. So I had another 10% that I could use to acquire new companies and new clients. Did that, grew that, got to the point, brought on some other consultants, and then eventually merged that into another company and then sold it. So I gave myself a little bit of room, but the way I structured the deal coming out of the gate was 90% of my time was going to be dedicated to them. They could have bought 100% or needed 100%. I just wanted to leave a little bit of room so I could expand.
Got it. In that process, what did you find most important to position the business so that it could be sold? I mean, you mentioned that you brought on some other consultants. Very often consultants aren't even thinking about creating real value with their business for the future potential of a sale. But in your experience, what was most important for you to position the company so that it could be sold?
So first off, it comes down to figuring out how to make sure that you're serving the client to the highest level. And the private equity firms, as you can imagine, are very, very demanding clients. And the talent space that really understands the nuances of that business are pretty small. So we started to acquire people that really had the expertise in this area. And then when I merged with this other company, they brought on a whole bunch of their clients. And pretty much we controlled probably 60% of the market in this particular space, in this particular niche. And to be clear, I sold my percentage back to my business partner, and he has to this day is continuing to run that company. It was not a complete sale of the company.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. So the next step for you, did you then go ahead and start your profitability consulting firm, or did you do something else?
Yeah, started a company that was a wholesale insurance operation, then started a insurance agency and started another insurance agency, and then purchased a manufacturing company that was manufacturing pedicure equipment that went into nail salons.
Okay. And that came from personal experience?
No, that came from ego.
Right, right.
That was a disaster. I had just sold the second insurance agency over to my partner. I've been in the insurance industry now for, it's probably gone about 25 years, and said, I want to try something different. Mm-hmm. And I started talking with brokers, started looking at about 300 different businesses that were for sale, and came across one where I loved the balance sheet, loved the P&L. It was an industry that I knew nothing about. It was going to be a huge challenge. And I'm like, I want that one. I closed in the business on 2008, August. 2 months later, the government said that we're in the middle of a major recession. I'm like, that's okay. I can figure this stuff out. We can weather the storm. About 2 months later, I figured out that the P&L, balance sheet, all the financials were completely bogus. Ended up in a major lawsuit with the ex-owner. Found out I had $2.5 million worth of inventory. Found out that some of it was actually even empty boxes at the top of the racks in the warehouses. So it was not a pleasant experience. So I had that business for 8 years. And then upon exiting that business, I started the consulting.
So you've really been a part of building multiple businesses and overseeing a lot of different operations. Yep. If you boiled all that down and tried to maybe offer one key lesson for a consulting firm owner from your experiences that could really help them to start or to run their business better, is there maybe like one or two things that you've just learned are critical?
Yeah, you've got to figure out where your niche is. And when you figure out what that niche is, you have to stay very close to that lane and go deep. Your best customers, your most profitable customers are going to come from that particular lane or niche. And the people that you're currently working with in that lane are going to be your best referral sources. If you're out there constantly trying to pound on the door and trying to figure out how to create new relationships without some sort of warm lead in, it's going to be extremely difficult. You want your current clients picking up the phone and saying, Bob, Sally, you need to talk to these folks, bring them in.
What if people don't have current clients? If they're just getting started, they've identified an area where they can provide the most value. Maybe it's related to what they were doing previously in a corporate role or some other function. So they know that, but they don't have any specific ins. Maybe they're even in a new location where they don't have connections or a network. Based on your own experience, what would you say to them is the best way to actually go about generating leads and getting appointments?
Yeah, go out and talk to people. And if you can't figure out who to talk to, go on LinkedIn. Find someone that's in the industry. Find somebody that might be a prospect and ask for 15 minutes of their time to pick their brain and find out what their biggest business issues are. Mm-hmm. Do that over and over and over again. Find out where the pain points are, come up with a solution, and then go back to that group.
Yeah. So important. Such a great recommendation. Something that I've certainly talked to a lot of clients about, right? It's validation. Some of you listening may have heard me tell this story before, but my cousin and business partner Sam and I, many years ago, we started a business, invested, I think it was like $23,000 into building this kind of online portal for experts and professionals and consultants. The problem is that we didn't actually ask the marketplace whether or not they wanted this. So we built in all these like really cool features, things that we believed the market wanted. But when it came time to actually putting it out there, the feedback that we finally got after we invested all this money was like, yeah, we don't want all this. The one piece that you have over here is kind of cool. And so we were fortunate to recognize at that moment, like, listen, we need to adjust. We need to make a transition here. We were able to pull that off successfully. About 8.5 years later, we sold the company, which actually just happened recently. So that was all good, but it was a really big learning experience for us. And so what you're sharing, Thor, is so spot on. Sooner that you can go out and validate the need in the marketplace, the real problem, and then connect that to how you can best add value and a solution, the better.
Yeah. And do you. And what I mean by that is if you look like everybody else, you're going to sound like everybody else, you're going to just get lost in the sea. Stand out. Whatever it is for you, just do you. Not everyone's going to like it. And that's the whole point.
Let's talk about that. So more specifically, I mean, what do you mean? Maybe offer some examples or experiences of like, how do you stand out? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
Great. So one of the things I tell my prospects before their clients, I said, look, we've got a couple of rules. One is I know every single one of you are ADD. If you can't focus while we're actually having our meeting, I do everything by Zoom. And there's a reason for that so people don't get distracted. If you can't commit to that because you're trying to do and multitask, we're not going to be a good fit. Yeah. I've got 2 excuses for you not doing what you said you were going to do. You died last month or you've been incarcerated for 14 days or more. I don't take any bullshit. Many of my clients have the ability to pay our fees and then not necessarily have to do the work. I'm not looking for clients like that.
When do you establish this?
Right up front.
Okay, so before they become a client.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so is this in the initial conversation with them?
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting is I do me. And I figured, okay, where's our niche? It's going to be males, 40 to 55. That have tough skin. It's amazing the number of female CEOs that are like, God, Thor, I need that. Because everybody I have around me is just like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, this is great. I didn't think it would resonate, but it does. Now, not to everybody. I had a preconceived notion that my style wasn't going to resonate with everyone, and it doesn't. But I'm shocked at the number of people and the varying backgrounds that it does.
Yeah.
Open the raincoat, right? Expose what's going on. If you tell me a lie, that's another thing. If you tell me a lie, we're going to come up with a solution that's based on a lie, and you're going to end up in a direction that you did not intend to be. If you can't tell me the truth, there's no sense moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And the concern that people would likely have to that approach is, well, listen, I don't want to offend people. I don't want to scare them. I don't want to come across as being too harsh. But really what I've observed and learned when it comes to marketing, Thor, is that polarization is extremely effective.
And
Right?
profitable.
Yeah, exactly. By standing out, like if we look around at the most successful characters, people in our society, they're typically people who stand out a lot, whether it's their looks, their fashion, their language, their actions.
Yeah.
They do things that allow them to be visible and really, as you said, stand out from everyone else. Some people are scared about that, but the reality is, if you try and play it safe, if you're doing the same things as everyone else, you are not going to stand out. And then your message won't resonate with anyone. But if you take a side, if you say, this is who I'm serving, this is, how I'm going to approach it, then you might push some people away, but you'll also attract others.
Absolutely. I was going through an annual planning process with a client recently, and he had put in I don't know, it was like a 14 or 16% increase over last year. And in some businesses, that would be fine. But for this one, it was way, way, way below what he was capable of doing.
Hmm.
I just sat there in the boardroom. I'm like, that is ridiculous. I'm embarrassed to hear that number come out of your mouth. And he's like, what? I said, that is ridiculous. I said, you are capable of so much more. You're playing small, and I'm not going to be a part of it. Now, why are you doing that? He admitted, he goes, I don't know how to do it. And he goes, quite frankly, if I really look at it, he goes, I don't think I'm worth it. I'm like, here's this major CEO. I'm like, my God, it's like this pillar doesn't think that he's worthy of it. And he goes, I don't know how to do it. I said, okay, that's fine. I don't know how to do it yet either, but we can figure it out. But let's figure out how to play big. Let's figure out how to play up to our potential. Let's figure out how to play a little bit above our potential. And then let's figure out how to make it work. Yeah. And he's killing it. And as a matter of fact, we had a raise. He'll do 43% this year.
Fantastic. Great example. I love that. I think the importance of thinking big is something that so many of us can benefit from, because too often we're playing small. We're not really realizing the true potential that we have within ourselves. So now, Thor, you are focusing on profitability consulting. The CEO that you just mentioned, you work with CEOs and leaders and so forth. But explain a little bit more of what you do. When someone hears profitability consulting, it may not be clear to them at first glance, like what that really means.
The firm is really divided up into two sections. On one side, we have profitability consulting, which is really the nuts and the bolts. And it's not, by the way, although we have the expertise to do it, it's not about going through financial statements and trying to figure out how to comb through those and figure out how to reduce expenses, although that's something we can do, but that's not really where most of the focus is. But how can we increase the profitability of the company at the end of the year? Sometimes it's as simple as shifting around the mindset from taking in sales, minusing out the expenses and figuring out what's left over. And before you take out the expenses, just take in the sales, take out your owner compensation, take out your taxes, and take out your profits. And then what's ever left over, run your business. That simple shift in how you take care of your accounting will revolutionize your profitability. So that's more of the tactical side. And then on the executive coaching, and that's really more of the mindset, because at the end of the day, it's kind of funny. 95%. We start off with, okay, what's going on in your business? What's getting in the way? We'll go through this whole thing. And I know where it's going to end up. I said, at the root of the entire thing, if I'm dealing with a CEO or founder or entrepreneur, really, what's getting in the way of the business? Why are we not at a higher level right now? It always comes back to one answer. Me. It always comes back to the person. Now that we know who's getting in the way, what do we need to do about it? And by the way, if you don't have the right team, you don't have the right people on your team, somebody hired them. Somebody approved them. Someone's keeping them. Someone's continuing to pay them. Who's that? I got one guy that he wants to move. His controller can no longer scale with the business. They're close to $90,000. And his idea is, well, I'll just make them a bookkeeper now. I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's take an overpriced controller that can't do the job, and now let's make him a bookkeeper. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, I feel bad. I was like, all right, you want to feel bad, or you want to run this company and do you want to be a leader? So on the executive coaching side, it's really about getting in, finding out where that CEO, where that founder, entrepreneur wants to go, and figure out what's getting in the way and devise a plan in order to get them there.
I think that's so important. I was on a podcast just the other day, and the person interviewing me asked, why do businesses, or what do you do when your business hits a plateau, or what should people do when their business hits a plateau? And my response was that a business doesn't hit a plateau. It's you as a leader or the owner that hits a plateau.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when you reach that point and you're not seeing the results that you want, it's not the business's fault. It's your responsibility to figure out and decide whether you are still committed to greater upside, greater growth, greater improvement. If you are, then you'll never be at a plateau. You'll always find ways to improve and get to that next level. It doesn't mean that you're always growing the same rate every single year, that you never have challenges or some negative effects. But certainly, if you are committed to improvement and growth, you're going to get there as long as you're really open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other big thing that we see a lot of is a lot of companies, even as much as they've grown, don't have a really strong COO or second in command. And the owner's still in the middle of things, whether they're doing 2 million or they're doing 50 million, they're still kind of stuck in the middle and everything relies upon them.
I really like the focus that you have on profitability, Thor, because these days, just with the environment that we have, we're all being kind of like bombarded and surrounded by social messages and social media platforms. A lot of people talk about this is what our revenue is, and we're making all this money. And it comes across to me as often being very kind of egotistical. And listen, if it works for them, that's great, each his own. But what I've observed is that many people, in talking about their revenues, don't actually look at what their profits are. You might see a company or someone talking about, hey, yeah, we make X millions of dollars. But when you really kind of dig into what they're doing and say, well, yeah, but what's your margin on that? What's your profit? It's like very little, right? And it's just interesting because the focus that you have on profitability, to me, strikes a chord in a very positive way, because it's focusing on what at the end of the day is the most important thing. It's not about just how much money you make. It's about how much do you keep, and then what do you do with that, and how does it impact your life, your freedom, your flexibility, your family, your community, and so forth.
Absolutely. And look, if your purpose of your business and your life is to save the world or feed the kids, you need money to do that. So create the profit so you have that at the end of the year to do whatever you want with it. And another thing that comes up quite a bit, and it doesn't come up too much in consulting organizations because the cash doesn't get lost, but it's very easy to lose cash in manufacturing operations and a lot of different companies. Just because you have a net profit at the end of the month or the year on your P&L doesn't mean that you've actually converted that to cash. Sometimes a lot of those profits can be tied up in inventory. I remember one year we had a huge profit. I went to my accountant. I said, I have no cash. Where's my cash? He goes, it's in your warehouse. I said, well, that's not my profit. He goes, well, that's what you did with your cash. You took your cash profits and you bought more stuff. I said, well, I need to buy more stuff so I can sell. He goes, that's right. And he goes, oh, you got another great news. You have all this income, so now you owe taxes on the income. I'm like, well, will the government take some of my inventory? Because that's where all my cash is.
Right.
So you got to be very careful. Profits are not cash. Cash is cash. Understand how to look at and understand backwards and forwards operating cash flow, OCF. If you don't know what it is, ask your accountant, get that form.
So you mentioned that doesn't affect consultants as much, right? Which is very true.
Yeah.
But what do you see from your experience of both running and interacting with professional service businesses and consulting businesses? What is the biggest mistake that you see people making?
They say yes. They say yes to whatever comes along.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. They haven't figured out how much their time and what their value is. And they're running around and they're willing to take things that don't fit into their wheelhouse. They have no boundaries. They have no priorities. I get opportunities for speaking. I get opportunities to travel all over the place. I don't do it. I've been there. I've done that. And I've made a decision that I don't want to spend my life running around and be in the middle of Kansas for 4 days working with a team on execution. I could do it, but that's not what my business is all about. I built it a different way. So it's not understanding what they will do, what they won't do, and saying no. Every yes is a no to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And leaders really suffer in this area. Figure out, put a line in the sand, draw a line. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. It's a fit or it's not a fit.
You've hinted at part of your daily routine. I mean, clearly you've become a successful consultant. You're productive. You get a lot done. You mentioned that you start your day, I think you mentioned around 4 a.m., but 5 a.m. you're swimming. I'm interested to know, and I think our audience would be interested as well, to hear from you. What does your daily routine look like, and what habits for you are just critical to your success in playing at the highest levels of performance?
Yeah. So first of all, this is not done every single day. I hope it is done every single day, but I'm human. I don't get up every day at 4:59, although my alarm goes off at 4:59 every day, unless I was out really late the night before. But on most days, this is how the schedule works. At 4:59, I get up and I'll spend about just 2 or 3 minutes in bed, not getting up right away, because I find that most of my creative stuff comes to me first thing in the morning. And I want to take the opportunity to jot those things down. I make a simple pledge. I, Thor Conklin, promise to do my best, to do my duty, to keep my commitment, so help me God. Then I need a little extra help because I just made my own pledge, but I could use a little bit more energy behind it. So I make a prayer. I said, thank you, Lord, for giving me this day. Give me the strength, the courage, and the focus to do my best, to do my duty, to keep my commitment, so help me God. Amen. Get up, make some coffee, have some water. I spend 60 seconds only. I look at my calendar, make sure that there's nothing showing up real early in the morning. This whole thing, by the way, takes about 50 minutes. You can cut it down however you want. I then go upstairs. I sit outside and I look at my goals for the year. I look at my goals for the week. I'll do some journaling. I'm focused on my top 4 items for the year. I'll go through a 10-minute visualization process where I actually see them, feel them, touch them. Take a couple deep breaths again. They'll come back down. I'll start my day in prep before I start it. So this is kind of a pre-prep process. I process emails. I do not check emails. I process emails, meaning that every single email something happens to it. If it gets acted on, if it's less than 2 minutes, if it's going to take more than 2 minutes, it goes into a folder then to be processed later in the day. I'm looking at things when I'm waiting for people to get back to me. I've got a file that's called WTF, waiting on things from. I make my micro commitments for the day, what I will do and what I will not do. I make that every single day. Micro commitments is a big piece of what I do. I set my calendar. I set alarms for all the important meetings. When we had this call coming up 5 minutes before this call, my phone went off. Wasn't focused on what was going on. I wasn't constantly checking my phone. What time is it? Set those alarms. And the other thing is I have a critical driver scoreboard, similar to a KPI, but instead of a lagging indicator like a KPI, I look at critical drivers. Those are the actions that are going to produce the KPIs.
Terrific. Love it. Thor, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And also really appreciate you coming on here and spending some time. Before we end, I want to just take a moment and make sure that people know how to learn more about your work. So where is the best place for them to go to?
Yeah, the best place is thorconklin.com. All social media is Thor Conklin. I almost said Instagram. I do not have an Instagram account. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn at Thor Conklin. And if anybody in the audience is struggling with something in their business and needs a little bit of help, if you send me a 50-word email or less with the biggest issue that you're facing in your business, thor@thorconklin.com, I will respond back with a 4-step process that will absolutely eliminate that issue, or at the very least, reduce it greatly to the point where it's no longer a big deal. And that takes a little bit of time because I respond to these emails personally.
Yeah, and that's a real gift. So everyone listening, if that resonates with you, you know where to go. We will have all this information, all the links in the show notes with the full transcript. So if you're driving or at the gym, just head over to consultingsuccess.com, type in Thor Conklin or even Thor. You'll find this episode, navigate to the podcast page. It will be all there. Again, Thor, thank you so much for coming on.
Man, thank you, brother. It was a lot of fun.
Certainly was.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.